This video is about the brain, but specifically how the brain can be affected by injury and how that affects communication. The brain is one of the most complex organs of the human body. It is made up of many specialized parts that work together to perform actions, send signals, and receive signals from the body's internal and external environment.
The brain is divided into the left and right hemisphere. Each hemisphere contains 4 lobes: the frontal lobe, the temporal lobe, the parietal lobe, and the occipital lobe. They are all connected and work together to perform complex processes. For the purpose of this video, we will be talking about the frontal, parietal, and temporal lobes only, as they have the most direct association with communication. However, it's important to note that the brain also consists of the cerebellum and the brainstem.
The frontal lobe is located at the most front part of the brain. It controls executive functioning. This includes attention, like when you watch a video, and working memory, like when you repeat a phone number until you can get to the phone. As well, it contains the motor cortex, which is what allows you to control your body and controls the functioning of your organs. Lastly, Broca's area is located here, on the frontal lobe in the individual's dominant hemisphere, usually left. This is how we plan and produce utterances, or in other words, where expressive language skills exist.
The parietal lobe is located between the frontal and occipital lobe. The parietal lobe integrates information such as spatial sense and navigation. It also contains the sensory cortex, which is what our brain uses to receive signals regarding the body's internal and external environment. So when you feel something on your skin, such as touch, temperature, and pain, it is also responsible for language perception.
The temporal lobe is positioned just behind the temples and inferior to the frontal and parietal lobes. It is separated from the frontal lobes with this groove called the lateral fissure. The temporal lobe contains the primary auditory cortex, which is how we are able to perceive sounds. The temporal lobe contains Wernicke's area, which is also responsible for language comprehension and reception. As well, it contains the hippocampus, which is where memory is stored. Lastly, the temporal lobe houses the inferior temporal gyrus, which is where words are stored. In other words, where our vocabulary exists.
Traumatic brain injury. A traumatic brain injury, or a TBI, occurs when there is a severe blow or jolt to the head that results in damages to the brain. A TBI can result in both long-term or short-term symptoms. As well, the severity of a brain injury widely varies.
When the frontal lobe is affected by a TBI, it is possible for Broca's area to get damaged as well, which leads to Broca's aphasia. Broca's aphasia is a non-fluent aphasia, meaning individuals who have this are not able to articulate their thoughts. It is important to remember that individuals with Broca's aphasia do not necessarily have cognitive problems. For the most part, they know what they are trying to say, but they struggle with forming words.
When there is damage to the parietal lobe, specifically the angular gyrus, Gerstmann's syndrome can sometimes occur. Symptoms of Gerstmann's includes dysgraphia, a deficiency in one's ability to write.
Damage to the temporal lobe can cause Wernicke's aphasia. This is a fluent aphasia which impedes an individual's ability to comprehend written and spoken language or to produce meaningful utterances. Individuals with Wernicke's believe that they are communicating effectively. Due to the fact that the individual believes they are being understood, they can become more easily frustrated in response to a lack of understanding from their communication partner. So one question we want to leave you all with is, how do I support someone with a traumatic brain injury? For individuals who have experienced damage to Broca's area, it will be difficult for them to string sentences together. It is important that you are patient with this individual. Leave time for the individual to process any external stimuli and to formulate a response. Make sure you don't try to finish their sentences for them because it can become frustrating for the individual. Instead, if a person is having trouble with a word, for example book, try using descriptors to help them process that word. For example, you could say, "Is it something you write in? Do you use it for school?" etc. Remember, individuals with Broca's aphasia don't necessarily have comprehension issues, so these descriptors will often be helpful.
Individuals with Gerstmann's syndrome are still able to produce and comprehend speech and language. They just lack the ability to write. Therefore, it can be helpful if you offer help whenever it's needed. For example, writing notes for them in class as they would have difficulty with this task.
For individuals who have experienced damage to Wernicke's area, It will be difficult for them to comprehend written or spoken language. As we've stated previously, they will lack the ability to produce meaningful sentences, meaning they will produce jargon. Ways you can support someone with Wernicke's aphasia are to use gestures when you speak. Gestures can represent the objects or actions while you're talking. It's also important that you don't shout at the person, as they're not hard of hearing, they just may not understand what you're trying to communicate. Finally, someone with Wernicke's can become frustrated if their partner doesn't understand what they're saying, so you should take your time in conversation and be patient. These are the two very important things for a communication partner to remember.